welcome to Hometown Novel Nights. We're glad to have you on. So we're going to start with Heidi, pronounced Chiavaroli.
That was good.
Was that good? I've been practicing all afternoon. Because she wrote, it's sort of like Chevrolet and ravioli mushed together.
That's right.
Anyway, Heidi says she wrote her first story in 3rd grade. It was titled, I'd crossed the desert for milk. And it wasn't until years later that she revisited writing using her 2 small boys' nap times to pursue what she thought at the time was a foolish dream. Despite a long road to publication, she hasn't stopped writing since. Put you on the spot. How long has that been? Well, the boys are in 5th grade now.
You make me do math. Too long.
Yeah, okay. So Heidi writes women's fiction, combining her love of history and literature to write split-time stories. Her debut novel, Freedom's Ring, was a Carol Award winner and a Christie Award finalist, a Romantic Times top pick, and a Booklist top 10 romance debut. Heidi loves exploring places that whisper of historical secrets, especially with her family. She loves running, hiking, baking, and dates with her husband. Her latest dual timeline novel, The Orchard House, is inspired by the lesser-known events in Louisa May Alcott's life. Heidi makes her home in Massachusetts with her husband and her 2 sons. She is represented by the Natasha Kern Literary Agency. So my question, and if it's part of your presentation, skip it over. What was the story I'd crossed the desert for milk about?
I still have it, actually. It was this preteen drama, and I think her parents were splitting up, and it was kind of, echoed some of the stuff that I was going through. So yeah, it wasn't very good.
Do you still have it?
I do.
So you should put it in an insert of one of your books.
Maybe. I don't know if I want to horrify my readers with it.
Okay, I'm not talking anymore. It's all you now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Scott and Anthony and Mike. I know he's not here, but he's the one who gave me the invitation. So it's such a pleasure to be with all of you Georgians, and it's so fun that we can kind of connect like this. And if I am glitching at all, would somebody let me know, because my boys are on their games and stuff. So I told them that if we glitch, that I would let them know. So please let me know, somebody, if you can't hear me. So yeah, I started writing, I was in 3rd grade and I wrote my first book. And I was a voracious reader and writer all through elementary school into middle school. And then late middle school, early high school, I kind of became convinced that to really succeed at a career, that I had to put my writing aside, that it just wasn't a practical thing to do. And so I turned to the sciences. I did really well in high school. I earned an amazing scholarship to my first choice college. And once I was there, I did well, but I just couldn't really summon up enthusiasm for these biology and chemistry classes. So it was, my beginning of my sophomore year in college. And that was shortly after 9/11. And despite a 3.98 GPA, I actually dropped out of college. My heart just wasn't in it. I was really shaken up by 9/11. I missed my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband. My parents were going through, some really tough stuff, and they were starting to work things out, and I just wanted to be home. And so I dropped out of college, and I think so it was like 5 years after that, I was married and I had 2 sons. One was a toddler and one was a baby. And that's when I started revisiting my love for fiction. And I was introduced to Francine Rivers and Karen Kingsbury. And I thought, this is really cool. I want to write this. I am, my faith is important to me. And I thought, I want to have write stories and kind of weave God into the storyline, not, you know, shove it down anybody's throat or anything, but he's a part of my life. So I wanted to kind of gently weave it into the stories. And so that was the beginning of a long journey. I joined ACFW in 2006. And then at this time, I was just writing secretly while my boys took their naps. Like, I didn't even tell my husband because I just thought, you know, this is just a kind of a foolish thing that I wanted to try out. And eventually I did tell him, and he was very encouraging. I entered ACFW's Genesis contest, which is a contest for unpublished writers, in 2006. And I received horrible scores back from that contest. And I also realized at that time that I was not going to be hearing back from the first agent targeted query that I had sent out. And so I became really discouraged. I thought, you know, I guess I don't have this talent, and I guess that's it for me. So I put my writing aside. It was several months, but I just couldn't leave it. There was just like, I had started something and it was kind of pulling me towards this journey, and I just couldn't put it aside. So I came back to it and I thought, you know, I know how to work hard. So if I can learn writing at all, then I'm going to do that. And so I tried, you know, I read a lot of craft books. I tried to learn from the judges' comments from that contest. I, you know, got more rejections. Fast forward 8 years later in 2014, after a lot of rejections and several manuscripts, I actually ended up winning that contest that I got those bad scores in the historical category. And that helped me land an agent who was the agent I had sent that first query to. So that was really cool. And I was thinking, okay, I'm on my way. You know, I got a contest win, a big contest win. I got an agent, and here we are. Well, I was wrong again. I got more rejections on the manuscript that the agent had signed me on. And so I just kept writing. And eventually I decided that I was going to leave just straight historical and try my hand at a different type of story. And that type of story was a dual timeline or time slip novel. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a contemporary story told alongside a historical story with a point of connection between. So I started writing this story about my contemporary story involved the Boston Marathon bombing, and my historical story involved the Boston Massacre, which occurred in the American Revolution. And I tied it together with this ring that had gotten handed down between these two heroines. And so it's a little bit of mystery, a lot of history, a little bit of romance. And that manuscript gained a lot of interest from editors at publishing houses. And I will never forget the night I was actually working down the street at a Walmart in the Lawn and Garden Center. And actually, I still work at that Walmart in the pharmacy now, just 8 hours a week. But I was in the Lawn and Garden Center at the time, and it was just a beautiful May night. And my husband and my two sons came into the garden center. And, you know, I was watering the flowers. So I put down my hose and wiped my hands on my, you know, super attractive blue smock. And I nearly fainted into the petunias when my husband told me that there was a message on our home phone from my agent with news of a contract offer from Tyndale Publishers, who was my dream publisher. So that was my little Cinderella story. And I love writing. I can't imagine not doing it now. And I'm so grateful to partner with Tyndale and putting these stories out. I do want to just let you all ask questions. My latest release, I guess I can talk a few minutes. I don't want to just cut us off either, but I could talk a few minutes about, this is my latest release, The Orchard House. I know that on the graphic for this night, the promotion that you had the tea chest, and I know that a lot of people like that, so I can certainly answer any questions about anything you have. But as far as the Orchard House, this is surrounding Louisa May Alcott, and I always wanted to write about her. Living in Massachusetts, I had visited Louisa May Alcott's Orchard House in Concord when I was 12 or 13. My grandmother had brought me and my mom and my sister there. And I remember just standing in her bedroom, right near her desk where she had written Little Women, and just having this experience of just complete awe. You know, this is like where she wrote about, you know, Amy's limes getting dumped out the schoolroom window, and where she wrote about Meg burning Joe's hair. And so I was just like amazed that this author had done this right in this little humble little room, and that I was the closest person in that moment to where it had all happened. And so that birthed my love, of course, for, you know, Louisa May Alcott, but also for history, because just being there in that spot just brought everything to life. And even to this day, I need to visit the places I write about, where things happened, and living in, it's one of the reasons I write based in Massachusetts, because I can just drive and see what I need to see, and then kind of come back and I can get my inspiration and really picture my characters there. So I knew I wanted to write about Louisa May Alcott, and I dug through her biographies and her books, her letters and her journals. And I was just looking, when I research, I'm looking for this nugget that's just gonna come out and grab me. And I just always trust that it's gonna happen, and it always has so far. But with Louisa, I read her account, Hospital Sketches, and it was about her time as a nurse in the Civil War. And she had a very tender experience with a young blacksmith who was a patient there. And just how she wrote about him was very touching. And she was actually given the task of telling him that he would not live. And just how she wrote about it was so emotional and tender. And she actually held his hand on the night he died and ushered him into eternity, as she said. And she said that the greatest thing she could do was to help another bear in their suffering. And I thought that was just so beautiful. And yet it was very bittersweet and sad, because there was a little bit of romantic feelings, and yet that never was realized. And so I thought to take that and kind of draw it out a little. So I fictionalized this young blacksmith, this Prince of Patience, as she calls him. I fictionalized his sister, and I developed this friendship between Louisa and my historical heroine, Joanna, and just tried to bring in some of those themes of Little Women, of friendship and sisterhood, and helping the downtrodden. And I tied that together with my contemporary story. My heroine in my contemporary story is a foster child at the age of 12, and she ends up being adopted by her best friend's family. And so you think, you know, I'd love my best friend to be my sister, but in reality, this has a little bit of trouble too, because, you know, this is an only child, and now her best friend, she's sharing her family with her. And so there's blessings and there's challenges. And in their college years, Victoria, who is Taylor's best friend, betrays her in a way that Taylor feels she cannot forgive. And so Taylor leaves Concord and goes to California, and she only comes back years later when their mother, Victoria's mother, is diagnosed with cancer. And then this is where they have to decide if they're going to work through some of their past. And this is also where they find Joanna's poems in Louisa May Alcott's Orchard House. And it kind of sets them on a journey to find out more about Joanna and Louisa, and hopefully, you know, mend their relationship. So it was fun. It was fun researching about, you know, the author of one of my favorite books. And yeah, so that's, I think that's it. This is my 5th dual timeline novel. I have 4 with Tyndale, and then I put one out myself, the one that the other publishers had rejected at one time. I really wanted that to go out, so I put that out myself. And then I have books, a new series coming out next week, actually. And this will be my first time writing straight contemporary, but it's contemporary fiction with a Little Women twist, because I wasn't quite ready to leave Louisa May Alcott and Little Women and all of that. So it's been fun this past year in this pandemic to kind of lighten things up a little and focus on that. So I will stop talking now. And if anybody has any questions, I am definitely open to answering them the best that I can.
I hate to go first because I've got like 5, but I'll just start with one. My wife loves Little Women. So
Yeah.
of your books, which one would you recommend of your books for her to read?
Well, if she loves Little Women, then if she likes history, probably The Orchard House. There is,
Okay.
yeah, there's some, it does deal, my dual timeline books are not light reads. They do deal with some of the heavier things. This one touches on domestic abuse. So if that's a touchy area for readers, sometimes, I know this is bad marketing, but I want to be sensitive and kind of tell them. I like kind of writing about some of the nitty gritty, especially in history. And because I like to bring hope and light to that and really not shy away from it. I think fiction is a powerful place to kind of work out some of these things that we deal with in life.
Do you have a favorite out of your books?
The Edge of Mercy is the one that I put out myself, and that one is really special to me. Although they're kind of like children, as you probably know, Gail. It's almost hard to pick a favorite sometimes, but I really love that one. But they each have special places in my heart, definitely.
Do you plan on continuing to write like things like historical fiction?
I think so. Yeah, I love history and I don't want to leave it. I like the dual timeline. So I'm kind of having fun with this contemporary series right now, but I write pretty fast. So I feel like I can kind of hopefully not just stay with one thing. The nice thing about writing dual timeline is I feel like I have a little bit of a freedom to write contemporary or write historical, and hopefully readers will be okay with that. And we'll see how my readers respond. If they say, "Oh, I just want you to write historical," then I'll definitely take that into consideration, because I love contemporary and historical, which is one of the reasons I like the dual timeline.
Are there any parts of history you will or won't write about?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure about that. I don't know if I'm going to turn anybody off by this, but I'm kind of, I think World War II, there's so many great books already in that time period.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I will go there. But I am fascinated also by early 20th century. I was researching off the coast of Massachusetts. There's a leprosy colony that was there. And I have a story that I always want to go back to, but you know, lepers, people don't always want to read about, I guess. So, but that's always fascinated me as well.
Heidi, do you always incorporate real historical characters in your novels?
Yes, so far I always have. I think that's kind of what gives me my springboard. When I read the research and, you know, I'm like, well, that was a real person. And that makes me, I don't know, it gives me this fascination for it. So even in the tea chest, when I write about the Boston Tea Party, there was a really harsh customs official, John Malcolm, who was tarred and feathered by the Sons of Liberty. And so I read about him and I'm like, oh, what if he had a daughter? And then, so I fictionalized her. My main people that I'm in my point of view with, I always fictionalize because I like to have the freedom to do that. So even writing about Louisa May Alcott, I thought about writing her in her point of view, and that intimidated me too much. I didn't want to do her any dishonor. So it kind of frees it up a little to always, you know, have the person I'm writing about in their point of view kind of straight from my head. it's it's definitely not the easiest thing. What I do is I usually start the stories with how it's written. So I'll maybe start with the contemporary story. I usually start with the contemporary because it gives me a place to ground myself in. And then I'll kind of think, okay, how is this going to happen in the historical? How are they going to mirror each other and complement each other? And then eventually, it's usually about 3 or 4 chapters in, I will kind of be able to sense what story is going to be leading the way. So in Freedom's Ring, it was the historical story. And in The Hidden Side, it was the contemporary story. And it kind of varies, but so I'll go off and just write that story. And then I'll come back and try to weave the other story around it. And of course, there's tons of edits to be done at the end where they have to be tied in. Freedom's Ring was, I think I had charts and graphs, and I confused myself so many times with the genealogy and all of that. But so it's a little bit of a delicate dance, but I think going over it and kind of, it's almost like a puzzle, like that you're putting together for your readers, you know, like, okay, we can't know that right now, but they have to know that then, or maybe we know it in the historical, but we don't know it in the contemporary or vice versa. So it's fun.
So does that mean, do you use an outline or do you have sticky notes all over the wall, or how do you?
Yeah, outlining is something I'm trying to be good at and trying to do, but usually I don't. So when I pitch to my to Tyndale, my editor, what I have to do is give them a synopsis. And so I kind of know the beginning, the middle, and the end, and yet I don't have a chapter by chapter outline. I just kind of go, and a lot of times my characters will lead me outside of that synopsis in crazy places, and I will just let them go there. So I think I could probably save myself a lot of editing if I could figure out how to outline, but I think by now I'm just realizing that's not how I do it. I know so many authors do it and do it well, but for some reason my brain doesn't work too much like that. Yeah.
So how much time a day do you spend writing, or a week or a month, or?
Yeah, it varies. When I'm on deadline, it'll be a lot more. I'll figure out how many words I need per week and then break it down into days and try to give myself a day off. But usually when my kids are at school, that's when I'm ideally writing or working on marketing or something. So, they're at school for 6 hours, but then there's laundry and the dog, and so it doesn't always work out like that. But yeah, I don't really have a set schedule. I try to, get in those 5 hours or so, but sometimes it'll be more when I'm on deadline, and sometimes it'll be less because life will get in the way.
The name of that Boston story, did you mention it?
That's called Freedom's Ring.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Did you say that was a book or a short story?
No, it's a book. That was my debut novel.
Okay.
Yep, that was my first one. Yeah, so that one was kind of in collaboration with my editor at Tyndale. I had actually pitched them the Louisa May Alcott story, and they were having another book come out at that time that was Civil War, and she really kind of wanted me to do one more American Revolution story because I had the 2, so to kind of make it a 3 thing in case they were gonna put it together at some point or whatever. And she's the one who said, well, how about the Boston Tea Party? And I'm like, okay, that was great for me. So I went into the research with that, and what started my idea for that was basically all the research I did. When I heard about the tarring and feathering of John Malcolm, that was a big part of it because, it was so horrible. Like when I thought of tarring and feathering, like I just think of these little textbook cartoons with the little feathers on the guy, and he's kind of like being paraded around. It was like a silly, shameful thing, but not serious. But when I read of this account and how brutal it was, and how, I can't believe he didn't die. That really got me thinking, of course, we're we like to think, oh, these patriots, these sons of liberty, they're the heroes, and of course they are, but yet they did some, not all of them, but some of them did some really horrible things as well. And so I wanted to kind of explore that, the two sides of that story. I'm big on that. And I also came upon the fact that there was this oath that had been passed around to those who participated in the Boston Tea Party. And I thought, wow, that must have been a little risky. And what if somebody found that? And like, these guys, they didn't talk about it, most of them. They like, a lot of them took it to their graves. It wasn't until much, much later when they were older and it was kind of, more of a heroic thing that they started saying, oh yeah, I was there that night. And even some people who weren't a part of it were like, oh yeah, I was there, because it was an admired thing. And so, but very risky at the time in that December 1773. So I thought, oh, it might be interesting to have that oath, and what if it got into the wrong hands, and what if my historical heroine Emma loves one of these men, but her father is pressuring her to kind of spy on them. And so that's kind of how that started.
All right, Heidi, get some water.
Okay,
We'll come back to you. All right, next up is Gail Pallotta. Award-winning author Gail Pallotta is a wife, a mom, a swimmer, and a bargain shopper who loves God, beach, sunsets, and getting together with friends and family. Gail is a former Regional Writer of the Year for American Christian Writers Association, a 2013 Grace Awards finalist, a 2017 Reader's Favorite Book Award winner, and a finalist in Top Shelf Magazine's Humor/Comedy category. She's published 6 books, poems, short stories, and articles. Some of her articles appear in anthologies, while 2 are in museums. So my first question for Gail, and if it's part of your presentation, skip over it, is I have never met anyone who has a book in a museum. How did you do that?
Oh, it's not a book, it's 2 articles. I wrote an article about Brookwood Station in Atlanta, which is a train station. And I worked with the Atlanta Historical Society when I was doing that. So they have the original manuscript for that article, Next Stop, Brookwood Station, at the Atlanta Historical Society. And I also wrote an article about Catherine Whitener, who is like called the mother of chenille. But actually, she is the mother of chenille, but also the weave that she invented is the weave that was picked up and used by the carpet industry. And there were little bits and pieces about her in newspaper clippings and little bits in magazines, but no one had ever written an article about her. So it's been a while, and I can't remember. It's a magazine put out by Cobb County, and she was the feature. And the article is in the Whitfield Murray Historical Society, which is in Dalton, Georgia.
Okay. Well, congratulations on that. That is very cool.
Well, thank you.
All right, Gail, I'm not going to interrupt again. It's all you.
Oh, well, I want to thank you first, Mike and Anthony and Scott and Angie, for having me. And I was going to tell people a little bit about myself. Basically, I am a wife and a mom, and I love long walks on the beach, and I love God and getting together with my friends and family. And I did, before the pandemic, I loved to bargain shop with my daughter. And of course, I like to write. I've been writing stories for as long as I can remember, but I didn't get serious about writing until I was in college. And I took a course and learned that I could work as an editor and a copywriter, and I probably could make a living. So that's what I did until I married. And after I married, I helped my husband with his business and sent out freelance articles. But all the time I was wanting to write a book. Well, when I sent out articles, lots of times I interviewed living successful people. And I would always ask, did your faith have anything to do with your success? 90% of the time, I got a positive answer with a quote. 90% of the time, the magazines took it out. So I vowed and declared that someday I would write books and they would all be Christian books. So when my husband semi-retired and my daughter was in college, I decided to write a book. Well, I got the book written and I had no earthly idea what to do with it. I knew nothing about the publishing world as far as books go. It's very different from writing articles. So I stumbled around in the dark looking at the writer's market, and I think I probably made some bad choices as to what to do with the book. But finally I went to a writer's conference, and here they said, yes, you're not going about this in the right way. You need to get online and join some groups. So I joined the Sweetest Romance Authors, where I met other authors who were happy to tell me about their experiences and to offer suggestions. And I joined a group called Clash of the Titles, where I met an author who helped me learn how to navigate the computer. And I also met another author who was my writing partner for 7 years. She was more experienced than I was, so I think I got the better end of that deal. And the whole time that this was going on, I heard by word of mouth about a local group of writers who were meeting at the Pancake House. So I joined the group at the Pancake House, and we sat around and ate and talked about publishing and our experiences. And every time I went, I learned something. Then I joined American Christian Fiction Writers, and within that group, I joined a critique group with 4 other ladies. One of the ladies said we should write retold fairy tales and publish them as a series. So this was actually the first book that I wrote after I got in the online groups. And it is a little novella, Mountain of Love and Danger. It's a retelling of Jack and the Beanstalk. And Jack's girlfriend has been kidnapped and taken to a mountain accessible only by helicopter. So he has to scale a treacherous cliff and get her away from the huge man who's holding her captive. Well, the second book that I ended up writing was not one that I had planned to write either. I have Lyme disease, and when I got online, lots of people learned that I have Lyme disease, but basically I have a pretty normal lifestyle. So I started getting all these emails about what treatments are you getting and where are you getting them? So I wrote Barely Above Water. Well, I didn't want the book about Lyme disease to be a heavy book. So that's why I made it fiction. The symptoms and the therapies in Barely Above Water are real. They are the symptoms that I was having at the time and the therapies that I received at that time. But the fiction part of the book, a young girl has a mysterious illness and she can't find help for it because the medical people can't diagnose it. So she hears about an alternative doctor in Destin, Florida. She packs up everything and moves to Destin. the only job she can find is coaching a ragtag swim team. Well, the kids are fun and sometimes comical, and she's determined to make winners out of them. Well, she falls for her boss, and he falls for her. But when he learns of the illness, he breaks up with her because he can't cope with illness. So I not only have to see her through the doctor's appointments and the swim team, I have to see her through a bumpy romance. Well, after that book, I wrote the book that had been rattling around in my head for a long time. I had always wanted to write a book based on my mother's beauty shop. So I wrote Hair Calamities and Hot Cash. In this book, a stockbroker from New York, Philip, crashes his car into Eve Castleberry's beauty shop in a tiny town in the North Carolina mountains. On the same day that her products have gone haywire and they're messing up all of her hairdos. He is in town to call on a wealthy, eccentric man who owns his own mountain to see if he can get the man to sign up with his firm. But he feels really bad about what he's done to Eve's beauty shop, so he wants to help her with the products. Well, she's a widow, and she's basically in love with her deceased husband, but she really needs help. Well, he helps her by getting some things from the drugstore for her to use. But they continue to work on that to get to the root of the problem, no pun intended. And when it comes time for him to call on the man on the mountain, they're pretty close. So she goes with him. Well, the man gives him $1 million in cash to invest for him in a duffel bag. Philip is very concerned that he might lose the money. Well, that's exactly what happens. The money's stolen. But Philip says, this is a really little town and Eve knows everybody. So we can find the people who took it and get it back, and the man on the mountain will never know. What they didn't realize, they were chasing after 2 of the FBI's most wanted criminals. Well, I enjoyed writing that book about a woman entrepreneur and about the little town in the North Carolina mountains. So I said my last book, the last book that I had published, is about a woman entrepreneur in the same little town. Lainey sent her husband all the way through dental school, and she did not go to college and she didn't take any business courses. Well, her husband got through dental school and left her for another woman, and her father has passed away. So her mother is trying to help her start a new business. So they're working on a catering business, and the mother finds a nice building where she can open a little tea house. But before the tea house gets opened, a drunk driver hits the mother and kills her. So Lainey is very stressed out. She is grieving over the loss of both of her parents. She's very angry at the ex-husband and wants very little to do with any men, period. And she's upset because she has no idea how to run the business end of the tea house. But she used to babysit for this guy who is now in college majoring in business. So he comes to help with the business. And she goes to deliver her first catered meal to Eric, who is a college professor with a broken foot. He is in excruciating pain, so much so that he can hardly think straight. But when he sees Lainey, he knows that he would like to see her again. So he orders 30 more meals under the condition that she will deliver them. She agrees, goes back to the tea house, and George has left for the evening, and she's in the dining area cleaning the display case. And she hears all this racket in the kitchen, pans falling, banging. She's terrified. She thinks everything she and her mother have worked for is being totally destroyed. Well, when the noises stop, she gets up and goes in the kitchen. Everything's perfectly fine. Nothing is amiss. Everything's in place, and there's no one in there. Well, she thinks she must be losing it. She has been under a strain. So she doesn't tell anyone. But when it happens again, she tells George. And George says, don't worry about it. It probably wasn't even in the kitchen. It was probably homeless people out banging around the garbage cans. Well, that really touched Lainey's heart. So she started donating her leftover food to the homeless shelter. But the noises continued. Well, Eric continued to heal, and she eventually warmed up to Eric. So he gets involved in helping her figure out where the noise is coming from. So that's the last book I had published, and my print copies just came out. So I don't have one, but here, my publisher did the cover. Here's a cover, a picture of the cover. So other than that, as far as my process, I make a very rough outline of the plot. And then I give my characters some physical characteristics and a little bit of personality. And I start writing them into the plot, not to write the book, but to see what they might do in certain situations. And after maybe 8 pages or so, I have a better feel for the characters. And somewhere in those 8 pages, I usually find a beginning for my book. Well, I've heard that people learn by listening, seeing, and doing. And I'm probably more of a doing person with some listening and seeing. But I continued to go to some writing workshops, and 2 people helped me a whole lot. James Scott Bell, who is a best-selling Christian author, and Donald Moss, who is a secular literary agent, but who was at a Christian conference. I have one book by James Scott Bell, which he suggested I get, called Revision and Self-Editing. And I have The Fire in Fiction by Donald Moss. Well, that's a lot to say, that since I found their workshops really good, I went to 2 with James Scott Bell and 1 with Donald Moss. So before I start a book, I go back over my notes from both of those workshops, and I go back to the books and scan the places that I've marked in the books just to refresh my memory, to make sure that, because it clicked with me, to make sure that I get those things in my book. And I guess that's about it. I appreciate being here, and appreciate people tuning in to listen to Heidi and I talk about our books. So thank you very much.
I'm trying to find your website. What's your website?
GailPallotta.com.
Gail, what were the name of those 2 books again that you mentioned at the end? Those help books?
Revision and Self-Editing by James Scott Bell. He also has one on plot, but I had taken his course on plot at the first workshop and went to a lot and had a lot of notes on that. So he said that I should just get the revision and self-editing. I don't remember the one on plot, but the other was The Fire in Fiction by Donald Moss. It has, the main thing I look at in that book, it has a real good chapter on tension, creating tension in your books.
Gail, you said you are primarily a Christian-themed author, correct?
Yes, all of my books are Christian books.
So I think my question is, when you're writing a book, when you're writing a Christian book, do you ever find it difficult, like trying to keep within, you know, the I want to say the doctrine of Christian beliefs and rules? Do you ever find it difficult to keep your characters in line with those particular beliefs?
No, actually, I think that Christianity, my grandfather was Presbyterian minister, and I think from the time that I can, as far back as I can remember, I've always been a Christian, and it's just so much a part of my life that it seeps into my characters' lives, just like it's in my life. So I don't start out with a particular doctrine, and my books are not preachy. Every once in a while, if the characters go to church, we've got some scripture there, or sometimes a character will recall a certain scripture, maybe be in a situation and recall a scripture that would help that character. But I don't set out to write about a doctrine or something like that. I do, like, the books do have Christian themes, like Mountain of Love and Danger is anything is possible with God, and Barely Above Water is mostly faith and hope, and the Cooking Up a Mystery is also faith and hope. So to that point, that there's a theme, a Christian theme there, yes, but not a doctrine. Oh, it's just a worldwide Christian acceptance of God and Jesus.
Okay.
And it's just sort of woven in. If I had known, I would have picked out something to read. Let's see if I can find anything. I know there's some Christian, Christian stuff in Barely Above Water. Well, one thing in Barely Above Water, this is sort of from my own experience. I actually had this experience. God led me to my alternative doctor. It's just really an odd story, but since we have extra time, I'll tell it. I had a friend who had seen a chiropractor 10 years before I got Lyme disease. And when I saw the medical doctors, and this is in the book in a different way, this is what happens to the character. When I saw the medical doctor, and they said, I had had all these tests, and they said, we can't do anything for you. I came home, and I was sitting in my rocking chair, and I thought, I'm going to die. And it just kept over and over in my head, over and over, you should call Dr. Lee. Well, I'm sitting there, I don't even know who Dr. Lee is. That was 10 years ago. And it kept on. It would not get out of my head. You need to call Dr. Lee. Finally, it occurred to me who Dr. Lee was. And I called my friend she had moved. I called my friend who had seen him 10 years ago. And he was a chiropractor when she saw him. And I thought, I'm on death's door. I don't need a chiropractor. But I called him, and he had become a holistic doctor. He is absolutely wonderful, and he is one of the best people probably in the country to treat Lyme disease. And I definitely feel that God led me there. So it's that kind of thing. It's not that I write about. It's not a doctrine, but this happens to my character, that she is led by God to go to this alternative doctor in Destin. And of course, when she is dumped by her boyfriend, she just has faith that God will work it out. So I don't know. Everyone has their own writing style, and everyone's trying to accomplish something important for God in what they write. So I don't know, but that's how I do it. It's just an overall Christian worldview where God and Jesus are helping people.
Any other questions for Gail? Any other questions for Heidi, who's still with us?
That's a great question, and it's kind of like trying to look into the future, and it's you can never really know. I do know that back in 2014, 2015, when I was pitching to agents, even before that, they said historicals were tanking, and that has certainly, already turned around. So it's like you can never know. And then I sometimes wonder with the dual timeline, I think I definitely got in at the right time, and now it's like bursting. Like there are so many authors writing it. And I wonder, I hope readers won't get sick of it. I love it. And I think it's kind of the best of both worlds with the contemporary and the historical. But, I'm wondering if at some point it will kind of lose its flavor, or if readers might get, okay, another time slip novel. As far as what's popular, it seems like historicals are very popular right now, at least when you look in the general market. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have much insight. I feel there is a trend towards some of these authentic, real stories that are tackling, there's so much going on in the world right now. As far as, the racial division, other divisions we might feel. And I think fiction is can be a great place to kind of come and, I don't know if we're going to solve any problems, but, kind of talk about these things and work them out in a story. And I think that's a great starting point. So I think there is some draw for that. Of course, it takes a little bit of gutsiness to do it, and wisdom. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't think I really answered your question.
Well, my publisher, which is Pelican Book Group, has mentioned to us that she's seeing more of a demand for nonfiction. So I don't know what that means. I did nonfiction in articles. I don't do it in books, but that's the only thing I've heard about that.
So does anyone else have any questions for the ladies, for our authors tonight? Because I want to thank them for their time. I want to thank all of our audience for their time. And I want to thank Anthony for putting this thing together.
Thank you very much.
Perfection once again. And thanks to Mike and Sharon and Angie and Angela from the people from Hometown Novel Nights. And we hope you can join us again next month.